Welcome to AI to Z, your gateway to the world of STEM and the careers shaping its future. Hosted by Airswift's Chief Revenue Officer, Anna Frazzetto, we delve into artificial intelligence, health tech, and more. With insights from industry leaders, Anna not only demystifies STEM, but also highlights the exciting career paths within. Whether you're an enthusiast, a professional, or considering a STEM career, tune in and journey with us into the future.
Hi, Pearl. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, so let me just share with everybody what Pearl does. Pearl is currently the Director of Technical Domains and University Relations, responsible for Schlumberger's strategic development of the global technical community and university collaboration. So this is a big responsibility for a global company.
Yes, I'm so honored and privileged to be able to be in this role, to be able to touch so many people at now Schlumberger has rebranded to SLB, and we've got a lot of technical folks that I run our corporate programs for their recognition, development, and strategic directions that we have for this group.
Great. So, Pearl, you and I had a chance to meet at a Women in Tech conference, which was a lot of fun. We could talk about that in a little bit. But one of the things I wanted to start off with is that I've noticed that SLB has recently rebranded. So can you share the reasons why and what your organization was targeting as a key outcome for this new brand? Because that's a big step for any company to kind of go through that.
Yeah, it was a big splash. There was a lot of work that went behind it. And in fact, I wasn't a part of the actual rebranding definition, but as an employee and a part of our SLB leadership, it's just been great, the change, because Schlumberger was known heavily, of course, as an oilfield services organization. We are the biggest service company for companies like ExxonMobil and BP and Shell. Those are our customers. And of course, with the importance of the energy transition and decarbonization, we actually have a lot of competencies and skills that can be applied not just for oil and gas, but beyond. So the rebranding, what's great about it, it's the short words around it is that SLB is a global technology company who is driving energy innovation for a balanced planet. And what's great about this new brand is us being a global technology company is who we were in the past too. It's not a big change of our identity. It's maybe a change externally of how we are seen in our identity. But in reality, we've been that for 90 years, close to 100 years, driving technology for different energy needs. And, in the past, it was heavily focused on oil and gas. We will still continue to do that, but the strategy is really around driving energy innovation to accelerate the energy transition, which is exactly what we need for our planet. So I'm really excited about it. It's very timely, but it's also very accurate of who we are. We're not trying to change who we are.
Right. And what I think is fantastic about that is because it highlights a couple of things. One, the fact that, technology is such a huge component to any organization out there. But a lot of times technology is almost treated as if it was a utility and kind of like back office operation. Right. But meanwhile, it's like the lifeline, the bloodline of a company. And that's exactly what SLB has done, which is fantastic. I also love the connection of having a balanced planet. That's such a powerful statement to be able to say something like that.
It really is. No, the reaction has been fantastic. It happened late last year, the rebranding announcement, let's say, to the market. But at the same time, it was an announcement to our employees. And the reactions internally have been fantastic because, again, it feels correct. it feels like we're not trying to change our identity of what we do. However, we are driving cultural changes towards the focus and the priorities on the energy transition, the decarbonization, the things that we need for our future with respect to the balanced planet. So it's really been great, both externally and internally, for attracting and retaining talent, let's say.
Right. And that's the key, right? Because if you think about it, a lot of times the association, and I'm not sure why, but the association with oil and gas is always viewed as, oh, it's, it's volatile. It's not, it's a dirty business, right? Like, to be aligned with something like that. But the reality of the situation is it's quite the opposite. You want to be able to kind of flip the switch somewhat and focus on the technology component so that you can, attract talent. Let me ask, in your role as the director of technical domains and university relations, what is your key focus and why is the SLB rebranding so important?
Yeah. So I have a super small corporate team. I'm not in charge of recruiting or talent acquisition. However, the corporate programs that I design and run and operate and adapt are focused on the 15,000 technical profiles that we have in the organization. I run community programs that have the technical communities engage and thrive on technical topics that they're interested in. I run the recognition and rewards programs for our technical career ladder, and also help guide and be a part of the leadership discussions, let's just say, on development directions. Like, what types of technical profiles do we want in the future? How do we want to develop the ones that we still have in our organization with all their history and experience? And how are they going to continue to grow to bring value to the organization going forward? As well as, how do we attract the ones that we want and maybe missing competencies that we have? So it's a great role to look system-wide across our organization, as well as making sure that we're focusing on the power of diversity. Previously, even known as Schlumberger, that was one of our most powerful elements, is that we hire globally. We hire everywhere we work. We work in, 80 or 90 countries. We have tons of nationalities. And it's always been a power of our organization being so diverse and so global. So leveraging the power by our diversity, we're heavily focused on our culture going forward of inclusion. So this is, in our technical community, is a big focus around my role as well these past few years.
Right. So now, what are some of the challenges that the organization faces when implementing DEI initiatives? You kind of we're talking about the importance of DEI in the talent acquisition and also the development component.
Yeah. Even in the recruiting component, we've always had great focus on our diversity initiatives in the past, over the past 80 years. I think our focus on nationality diversity came up maybe 50 years ago, and it just exploded. And we hired in all countries that we work, and not all companies in our industry do that. And so it's one of our competitive advantages of having so many different cultures. And we feel the pros and cons of that. There's always difficulty sometimes in being able to collaborate when you have different perspectives and different cultures. We've also focused on gender balance over the past 20 plus years. And I think this is somewhere we still see we have room to grow. And this is where, Anna, you and I met at this Women in Tech. It was so fantastic because as we look at the number of women coming up through universities, getting their degrees in STEM, it's still not at equity at all. Many studies have shown it starts as early as elementary or middle school in terms of interesting girls to want to study in these technical degrees. So when I've been looking at DEI initiatives, focused specifically on women, the culture of the organization is so important. I remember this comment from a colleague of mine who is really in our DEI leadership. And she said once, we really want to make sure that we're driving change through understanding rather than through KPOs or objectives instead of metrics. Of course, you want to watch your metrics, but you don't want to drive behaviors just on numbers. And so the past 3 to 5 years, we've been focused more on culture, on leadership, and how we're adapting individuals' behaviors to become advocates and allies for all people who are potentially different or underrepresented in the organization's culture. So I love that statement. It's really being cautious about metrics and seeing how really culturally and dialogue and true behaviors are driving inclusion in your organization.
And that's such, I think that's such a great takeaway for the audience, talking about, like the power of metrics and how it can actually work against you in certain situations. I had a gentleman once say to me, and God, if he only knew how often I quote him, because he said, Anna, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to get to like 50-50, equal balance? Why this obsession with having this equality? What if women are just not interested in, being in tech? And my response to that was always, well, no, it's like we're trying to create an equal playing field, right? So it's not, because you see students graduating and you see that there's an interest in STEM, those numbers are starting to go up, but it doesn't translate into the workforce. And why is that? So what can we do that can create that inclusive environment that wants people of a diverse background want to stay in that field, right? Exactly. And that's the challenge.
Yes, that is the challenge. And I've been with SLB Schlumberger before for over 30 years, so I feel like I've gone through cycles of what that feels like in different decades, I would say. And this word of inclusion is fairly new. People haven't been talking about inclusion all that long. We've been talking more about diversity and the power of diversity, and that we want to have diverse teams, but in fact, having diverse teams that maybe still don't feel included is not as powerful as really having individuals and everyone feeling like their voice is being heard. And what's great about our new brand focused on energy innovation is that there's tons of data out there that shows that diverse teams drive better solutions, more innovation solutions. That's true for technology. That's true for many different types of industries. So leveraging the power of our diversity, I think is going to be a step function change as we drive this more inclusive behavior. And I remember listening to this other podcast. It was one of the most eye-opening thing. And it was at the end of the conversation, the woman who was presenting said, it's really easy to celebrate, to reward, to highlight, to give recognition to someone who is saying something that you would have said yourself. Oh, I agree to that. I would have said exactly that. That is a great idea. So a little small change in individuals and leadership, a little tip is, why don't you celebrate or recognize or highlight or reward someone who said something that you would have never thought of, saying, oh my gosh, I would have never thought of that. That is a great idea. That's really drawing in the power of the different perspectives and how people can add to the solution and make it even better, rather than just having like-minded people all say the same thing.
Right. And that will also encourage, I think, it'll encourage maybe for somebody who's a little bit shy at the table
Yes.
to speak up, because they see that whatever information is being, thrown out there, that it's received in a positive light, right? So that makes it definitely makes it more encouraging and more inclusive, which is the key. Another component, Pearl, and I don't know if you've heard, adding belonging to that, like your DIM belonging. And so what do you think about that? Because I think belonging is kind of an interesting twist, right? It's like you personally, how you feel that you belong to the group, as opposed to inclusion is where the company is trying to include you.
Yes, I love this word belonging. In fact, I was just talking about it at one of the meetings where we had met the organization. It's for the Greater Houston Women's Chamber. And, the sense of belonging is different from just fitting in. You hear a lot of people saying, oh, I'm trying to fit in, and I'm trying to act like the company expects me to act. And I'm putting on this, persona that I think my peers and leadership want to hear, versus just being who I am. And authenticity is really often linked to authenticity as well. So the sense of belonging is where you're like, I don't have to change who I am to feel like I fit in. That was this kind of statement that I remember hearing. And as a Chinese American girl growing up in suburbs of Houston, which was primarily white, and then moving to places like France, which in the organization that I was working for weren't too thrilled to have Americans join the French culture there. And then at one point moving to Malaysia, and I was often seen as my French husband's local Malaysian girlfriend rather than the professional person coming from America, or my background as a mechanical engineer. I was realizing not that long ago that I've never been in the majority of any organization or any place. Even as a student in mechanical engineering, I was always seen as, just the few percent of women. And this sense of belonging is foreign to me, let's say. I think I've always had to adapt to try to fit in to be able to succeed. And lately, now that I'm older and have lived many more years than I did before, I'm starting to really realize being my authentic self is the best for me, and finding space where I really do feel like I belong without having to change who I am has been wonderful. It's been a great experience. So finding spots like this is really based on the culture of the people around you. It's hard to define. It's really hard to define.
I could so relate, Pearl, to what you're describing, because I grew up on the Lower East Side of New York, immigrant parents. I'm first generation in this country, Italian immigrants. And I grew up in a neighborhood that was, we had, Asian people, African-American people, Hispanic people. I mean, we had people from all over the world. And so I went to NYU, and I, then started working. I never understood diversity, right? Like, to me, that was the norm, because that's how we grew up. And being like one of two students that graduated in computer science and mathematics, I was like, okay, like it didn't click with me, like you're different or you don't belong.
Right.
It's like you had to adapt to whatever was happening around you, which is always like fascinating.
It is.
That becomes your norm.
Exactly. Our norm of becoming adaptable, it's a great skill, but you don't realize that you're adapting because you don't actually feel like you belong or you don't fit in. You're changing a bit. You're a chameleon to succeed in the environment that you're in. And maybe we should be pushing ourselves to not have people be chameleons and just try to be open to. And it's hard because sometimes you don't understand the perspective of that other person or the cultural background that's making them behave in a way that you're not. used to, and maybe it causes discomfort, but having that open mind saying, okay, where are they coming from? What is their intent, et cetera, et cetera. It's really a very intentional self-awareness skill to develop. And what I love about SLB is that we're pushing that open-mindedness skill dialogue with our leadership, which with time, the intent is to have it trickle down, through the management, because we are trying to make culture changes with the brand. It's not just saying, okay, we have this new pretty logo and we are saying that we're driving innovation. It's linked to culture change as well in a very positive direction with inspirational goals for our culture, which, like I said, is falling quite well internally on the employee ears. So I'm excited about it, being a part of that.
Yeah. So this kind of brings us to our last question. How can organizations create a more inclusive and equitable environment?
All of these things I was talking about, I'm learning from being with SLB and being open-minded and discussing. I really think it's one of the greatest things. Well, you have to get leadership engaged. You have to get your leadership. It comes from the top. Unfortunately, we feel like, you want things to bubble up, bottoms up, and you have to have both sides coming. But without leadership driving a cultural change, I don't think it's possible. So seeding advocates and allies who really get it. Everyone is on a continuum. I've heard of this word, the advocacy continuum, of becoming more and more aware of understanding. Me as a Chinese American woman growing up in the U.S. and Texas, I have no idea what it's like to be an African American man, from wherever they are. Realizing that you have no clue what it's like to be that other person can really drive open-mindedness and not apply your own biases, principles, experience on others. So having more discussions, having more people be curious. I remember having a conversation with a woman, a mom who has a 12-year-old child who had a serious, birth defect, and she's going to have to take care of him for his entire life. Often we don't learn that stuff about people around us. And so being curious and asking questions to see what it's like to be that other person, I think is a great first step. Something super small, saying, be curious and see what it's like for you have a colleague who's in a wheelchair. What is it, what challenges do they have, and how can you support them? How can you support another woman in the organization or somebody who is struggling in the organization? There's generational biases, if they're older or younger, implication stereotypes, etc. So there's so many lenses. That's just asking questions and being curious and having leadership support for cultural inclusion, I think, are two huge factors to focus on.
Well, Pearl, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I enjoyed our conversation. If you were going to leave the audience with a power word, what word would you leave them with?
Oh, gosh, just off the cuff. A power word. A power word. I think for the broad audience, it would be self-awareness. Understanding how you're thinking, what you're thinking, what's influencing what you're thinking, what's influencing what you're feeling. It's a lot around EQ, but I think the first step is self-awareness and being brutally objective about yourself, both positive and negative, and keeping that as calibrated as possible so you can interact with others around you in the most authentic way that you can.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Pearl.
Thank you, Anna. Great to be here.
Thanks for joining us on the AI to Z podcast with Anna Frazzetto. If you found value in today's episode, consider following for more insightful STEM discussions. We'll be back with another deep dive. Until then.